Welcome to LinkedUp, Breaking Boundaries in Education, a podcast that focuses on what is happening in education today, connecting everyone to the movers and shakers that are breaking boundaries in the education arena.
Welcome, everyone, back for another episode of LinkedUp, Breaking Boundaries in Education. So, Jerri, when you were teaching, did you notice that students' motivation changed when they knew they were presenting for someone? Something in particular that always made a difference for me.
Absolutely. It makes a huge difference. And if I can tell you a quick little story, Alan November told me once. Mm-hmm. I love this because I think it makes the point. He said that there was a girl that was well known for her blog, and her blog went out to millions of people. And he happened to be at her school, and he was in the teacher's lounge, and he said, "I want to meet this girl, she's famous." And the English teacher was there, and she said, "Famous? She doesn't turn in any work to me." And he said, "How can that be?" So when he found her, he said to her, "Your English teacher said that you're actually failing the class because you're not turning in any work." And she said, "Well, I have to decide. Do I want to share my work with millions of people or just that one teacher?"
Oh my gosh, that's hysterical.
Doesn't that make the point?
It does.
Yes.
It's all about authenticity. And we have guests today who have written not one, but two books on this for different audiences. And I can't wait to hear all about it.
Well, yes. And, right before school starts, a week before school starts, what are most teachers doing?
Yeah.
Well, if you're Grayson, McKinney and Zach Rondot, you're coming on podcasts, sharing your expertise. You're not getting that last little catch of the sun or that little afternoon nap. You're sharing your expertise. And that's why we love having you on the show today. So Zach and Grayson are both teachers. One teaches fourth grade, one teaches fifth grade. They're in the same school in Michigan, and they have written a book to make kids' learning experience more incredible, to make them experts and give them some real life lessons. And so welcome, Grayson and Zach. We are glad to have you on the show today.
Thank you so much. It's a privilege to be here.
Yes, we're thrilled. So, from our understanding, you wrote a book about a year ago in which you were helping teachers. And tell us about your book. What was the book about and how did it help teachers?
So I'll start, if that's okay. A number of years ago, when Zach was very brand new to teaching, he came into my classroom to teach a demonstration lesson. He was, he was in the final stages of the interview process, of which there were probably 12 steps, and he had made it thus far. And he came in and taught an amazing lesson. And a few days later, we were teaching down the hall from each other. And pretty quickly, we realized that we had a lot in common. We were both interested in technology. We were the only two male teachers in our elementary school. So that was a nice little bonding moment. And as we started to talk, we kind of started to share some ideas of our philosophy on education, and we started presenting on technology tips that worked in our classrooms to people within our district. And over the years, our ideas kind of evolved from doing this technology training where we're like introducing apps to use on the iPad or websites where you can get kids to, apply what they know, to really more of a philosophical question of like, what is, how are we using technology to transform the education of our students? And so that coalesced into what is called the expert effect. And our book called The Expert Effect. It's a 3-part system to break down the walls of your classroom and connect your students to the world. Because we realized, we have this technology at our fingertips that allow us to connect our students to experts outside of the classroom teacher. We can get them to build things like websites and podcasts and app prototypes and presentations that give them the chance to become an expert in their own right on the content they're learning. And then the third part is all about giving them a platform to share their expertise, just like we are today. And that was the idea behind the book.
So the experts are the experts out there in the field that they want to learn about, but it comes full circle back to the student becoming the expert. Is that what the expert effect is?
Yes, absolutely. We want to
Did I say that correctly?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's we think of it as kind of a hierarchy of getting them to learn from experts, then they become the experts, then they teach the world as an expert.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that is fabulous. And then before we get into the contents of it, I just wanted to say, Zach, tell us about the new book that just came out.
Yeah. So kind of like pretty quickly after releasing the first book, the goal was to inspire teachers, which ultimately would have the effect of teachers making changes, which impacts the kids. So with the Expert Expedition, we wanted to create a picture book that kind of takes away that middle part and gives a book in the hands of students that they can read themselves and be inspired on kind of those same three parts. We teamed up with a high school English teacher in our same school district. We met last summer. Her name is Soraya Ali Ahmed, who did all of the illustrations. And they are truly, truly fantastic.
So I have a review that I found, and I just want to read it. This book beautifully captures the joy of curiosity and learning for students of all ages. Encouragement is given to follow passions and create something meaningful to improve the world around us. What a great review. And yes, the illustrations are magical, actually. Wow.
Yeah,
Really
that was a non-negotiable. We wanted it to be bright and colorful and, be well representing of the students that we teach. And she brought in a whole other element of fantasy. So it's a great picture. I think it's perfect for kids because it blends the world of technology that they live in. They'll never know a world without an iPhone, but also it keeps the qualities of childhood that are timeless, which are the imagination, mermaids and fairies and all kinds of magical. So it's a very good blend.
And, the two of you teaching fourth grade, fifth grade, you're right in that zone where the kids can soon lose that when they get to middle school. So I think it's really important. I think, first of all, I think it's wonderful, the two of you. It's hard to find male teachers at the elementary state grades. And I think it's fantastic that you're doing that. We need male role models in those grades. And then also, of course, for you to encourage this sense of curiosity and creativity in students and keep it going so that, you don't have that lull in between and keep it going, hopefully. And I love that you've partnered up with a high school teacher to help that as well.
I have to tell you, I have here a cup that was from a PBL project about 12 years ago where students created a coffee shop in the school lobby. And so that's so funny that I just chose that cup today. But
it is, it's funny too, because I know you did a lot of PBL when you were teaching also, Jerri. I taught seventh grade science, so I did a lot of this. And I actually wrote a book also. And the whole idea too was, and this was back in the 90s when using technology was sort of new. So it was also, the focus was on problem-based learning, but it was also how technology can support your efforts in doing that. And then showed how, different types of popular computer applications, as it was called back then, to help support that. And I'm just happy but in between that time, there has been this initiative of testing, and it can be really hard for teachers because it's draining, number one, and number two, you sometimes can lose some of that excitement for your teaching in the classroom. So I think it's so important that what you both are doing to help teachers make it easy for them. And I want to hear about your process for doing that, for making sure that problem-based learning stays alive, because it's really the best way for students to learn. It makes it immersive and makes it makes them connect to the real world, makes things come alive.
We were fortunate enough to have our district provided us with the opportunity to learn from Tony Wagner, who is a fellow at Harvard. And, he's done all this.
Oh, my gosh, the best.
So, yeah, he was our opening day keynote speaker this year. And his message part of his message that I took away is that we are no longer living in the knowledge-based economy. And, when Jamie, when you were talking about the testing in a lot of times is just a memorization thing. It's where students are trying to soak up as much information from the teacher and the textbook as possible, and then, kind of regurgitating it, to use a kind of a yucky mental picture, but they're putting it back out there to show how much they can remember. But as you said, the technology has evolved so much so that the answers are in their pocket. It's a Google away. You can ask your smart speaker or your watch or your phone or whatever. And it's not so much about the knowledge economy anymore. It's about the innovation economy, or the innovation age, where imagination is going to be the thing that really is a marketable skill, and being able to not only have the knowledge, but actually apply it in a novel way.
Yes,
absolutely. It's funny too, and I want to hear about your book, but I just wanted to say this too, because I was worried about my daughters. One is a junior in college, and the other's just now a freshman at Georgia Tech. And I was worried. My older daughter went the IB track, and that was fantastic for her. She's in fashion. I just wanted them to have that creativity. When they were younger, they did, Shark Tank type experiences, and I loved that. But they, like I mentioned, it kind of, they lost some interest in that as the years went on. And then my younger daughter went the AP track, and I felt there was a lot of memorization in there. And it doesn't have to be, because I know there are some AP courses where there's a lot of creativity, but it depends on how it works. But now my daughter is doing industrial design at Georgia Tech, and I'm so excited for this new phase that she's going to experience for creativity and creation and making new things. So,
right, you said there were like 3 stages to it, right?
With your approach to keep this alive.
We do a lot of talking to teachers. And I think one thing I realized very early on, when we talk about project-based learning, a lot of teachers kind of like shut down at the idea, because their misconception of it is that project-based learning means that they stop teaching and just like let the kids explore and discover. And, that's absolutely not the truth. Like, as teachers, we still hold that valuable role, and like, students can't create something unless they consume information and learn about it first. So, we always start by telling teachers we still have to teach our direct instruction mini lessons in the start of project-based learning. We still have to support our students and give them rich resources throughout. So I always like to start by saying that, because a lot of teachers shut down just thinking like their classroom is going to be
like
hands-off and goes and
right. Free for all. Yes. Yes. Well, tell us about this process. What is the first stage of the process?
Sure. So I like to think of this as like kind of different levels of inquiry. If you're just starting out and wanted to make a unit a little bit more engaging for students, we like to get our students to learn from outside experts, outside of just ourselves. I remember as a kid thinking that my teachers were the smartest people in the room always, and that they knew all the answers. They had could answer every question. And for the most part, they really could. And that's all the resources besides books that we had. But now as teachers, we don't have to be that way. Like, for example, my school, we do a unit on extreme weather. So the first year we taught it, we just kind of went along with the book and the program. The next year, my teaching partner reached out to a local meteorologist and emailed him and asked if he would, at that time, Skype with our class. And he responded right back and said, can I come in one day? I get off work at 2 p.m. I could come in one day. I'd much rather come in than do a Skype. So he came into our classroom. He explained to us how weatherman used green screens and how they got into their groups. He walked around to every single group and answered questions about hurricanes and tornadoes and this and that. And that just like elevated the experience so much more from one simple email. It's great PR. Also, they took a picture with our class, put it on the morning news the next day. So the kids came in the next day thinking they were famous, and like it just added a whole level of excitement, not all of which we planned for at the time. So that's my favorite example of bringing experts in. Grayson, do you want to share one?
One of the tips that we always give teachers who are interested in getting started in this is just start with your own school community. The families of the students in your classrooms. Put it out there what you're looking for, and you'll be surprised at the connections that people can come up with. I'll give an example. Our fifth graders have a writing unit during the school year where they are to become journalists. And so me, never having worked for a newspaper or magazine, I've never done any kind of, investigative reporting, might not be the best person to have them learn from. And so I put the message out to our students, and we were connected with, we live just north of Detroit, a reporter from the Detroit News, and he was able to come into our school, and he brought, all kinds of swag. He got little notepads for the kids to use as they looked for news stories and scoops around our, cafeteria and the kindergarten playground. And they felt like they, when they're learning from experts and they see themselves as valued enough to learn from somebody important, somebody who knows what they're doing. Not to say that teachers don't. Teachers are the first experts in their students and their students' needs and their curriculum. But it just makes it, like Zach said, it takes it to a whole new level when you can get experts involved. The other resource we point teachers to is your own staff, just putting the message out to your staff that you work with, because it's amazing the number of expert connections that you can find. I'll give an example. Last summer, Zach and I taught a middle school, high school aged summer camp, which was called the Oakland Schools Innovation Lab. And students came with a question in mind, which is, how can we use our voice to create a more just society? And they basically brought a passion. They thought about something that was really important to them. And then with that passion, they were going to try to answer that question. And we had, I had one group of students who was very interested in video editing. And so just put the message out to all the teachers we were working with at the summer camp saying, if anybody knows anybody who's involved in video editing or video production, we would love to talk to them because these students want some tips. And so within minutes, in our group text, we found out that we had a connection to an editor who worked for Pixar, and he had edited movies at Pixar, Marvel, the Star Wars, like that. Disney owns everything now. And he was able to Zoom with us and talk to us about, the process of putting together a trailer for a movie and the kind of technology that he works with. And as a teacher, no matter how much we try and how much research we do, it can't come close to the real thing of learning from somebody like that. The kids really feel like they're getting a treat when they're able to hear it directly from the source. So reaching out to your families and reaching out to your staff can really make those connections a lot easier.
Yes. And I suspect you learn a few things along the way too, don't you? Yeah.
And even for students who that's not their passion necessarily, but you're exposing them to all of these careers that they may never have considered before, and giving them the ideas like, well, that person looks like I do. Maybe I could do that one day.
Yes, I agree also with really connecting with the community first, because it allows for relationships to be built within the community too. I remember when I was teaching science, we did lessons. I was doing lessons on reaction time. So we were doing labs on it. But then I also had the police department come in, and they talked about reaction time when you are driving. And it's funny too, because we have in my town now where I live, one of the police officers is a student who I had in that class. And I always tell him that he owes it all to me, because this was a motivator for him. But they do, and it's always their favorite day of the year when they get to do something different like that, when they have a guest speaker come in who is an expert dealing with something they're learning about. Or, there are tons. I have a webpage actually on connecting schools with experts and other schools. And I have a ton of different links that give access to experts, ask an expert pages, right? There are tons of them out there. So it's really easy to find. But starting with your community, I agree, is really the best place to start, and school community too.
Speaking of easy to find, we've been asked a lot, like, oh, how is this? Because this book came out and then, in pandemic time. So we're asked like, oh, how has that affected, these strategies? Well, if anything, it has made finding experts so much easier because everyone knows how to Zoom now. Everyone knows how to do a Zoom meeting. When we started doing this, before all this, like we'd ask people and they're like, I'm not good with technology. Can we test it like an hour before? So on my like prep, I'm like kind of walking them through how to do a Zoom. With that obstacle is like out the window.
That's right. You're right. That's a very good point. It was, like when I started back then, it was See You, See Me video conferencing software back in 1993. And that was, really tricky. And then otherwise you can email. We did that a lot too back then. But then, with Google Meet, Skype, Google Meet, and now we're in a Zoom world, right? We've evolved.
And it's so convenient that people are willing to do it because it's really, you can make it convenient for them too. Yes. So after you learn from an expert, what's the second stage?
So now we really want to get our students to become the experts. They've done some learning, and it's not just learning from the expert. They've done, some research and learning on their own. Now it's like getting them to, go through a phase of project-based learning and deciding like, how are they going to, what are they going to do with their information? What are they going to make? What are they going to create? How are they going to take this learning? It's kind of going against the system of before we would teach and then take a multiple choice or essay test at the end and then move on. So now it's getting the students to come up with, what do they want to create with the process? And I think a huge distinction is in that process, students need to have choice of what they're going to make. If every project at the end looks the exact same, like it's not true project-based learning. If every student is required to make a structured keynote presentation, then that's not true project-based learning. So some of our groups of students, if they're working in groups, may decide to showcase their learning through like creating a website. Like we're a Microsoft district and have access to Adobe Express. So that's a great tool we use for that. Some groups maybe want to film like a documentary type video using iMovie and the camera on their iPads. Other groups, which we love, absolutely love, it's not technology. They'll do like a role play, or they'll write scripts. They'll make kind of costumes and props, and they will do a live performance in front of the class, showcasing whatever they're learning about. So a lot of it comes down to what do the students want to do, but how can they effectively show what they know? And what we find is when they're showing it, when they're doing something, when they're creating something, that's when the learning like really sticks.
That's right. That's that aha moment, right? I mean, it's all about differentiation. And when you're giving choice, that's what choice is, right? You're giving them the opportunity to show, it's, product differentiation. They're showing their understanding through the best way that they can. So whether they're a visual learner, auditory learner, kinesthetic, tactile, they can choose what that product is. Everyone has the same umbrella concept that they might have to learn, but show your stuff, show your understanding and what's in a way that's fun for you, that makes sense for you, and something that interests you. And to your point earlier, there are so many different modalities now, different platforms that are easily accessible. Most are free. And if we don't know how to use it, they can certainly pick up on it instantaneously.
Yep.
Yeah, I'll give a quick example of that. I had never played Minecraft before, or maybe I had, gone into a Minecraft world and dug a hole in the ground, and that was the extent of my knowledge. But over the last few years, my students have taught me a lot about Minecraft. And so, using something that they already love and that they're already asking to do anyway, and then harnessing that enthusiasm for a project-based learning is another great platform. For example, just give a quick example. We were learning about the Underground Railroad. And so we went into one of these Minecraft worlds, and Minecraft Education Edition has added so many great templates to use. It connects to curriculum in all kinds of ways. But there was a template that was a blank museum. And so it was just this huge structure, a huge building that was completely empty. With some, big vaulted glass ceilings and beautiful wide staircases that you could explore. And kids spread out, and they found an area of the museum to turn into their exhibit. And so each group basically built an exhibit inside Minecraft to showcase what they had learned about different aspects of the Underground Railroad and the process of escaping slavery. And so, for example, one group built a log cabin, like a small house inside, and they had hung out a quilt on the front, and they talked about the symbols that Underground Railroad stations used in order to show that it was a safe place for freedom seekers. And so that was just an example, and we toured from exhibit to exhibit. It was like we were on a field trip to a museum, but the docents were the students. They were the experts.
Right.
A fun. And, and I never had to, get on anybody about, open your textbook, get out because they were chomping at the bit to get onto Minecraft and build something amazing. So
pure motivation when it comes from within. And, I always think this too, if there was more PBL going on in the high schools, I feel like dropout rates, and that might just be me, but I feel like dropout rates would go down because they're getting up in the morning and realizing like, I'm connected to something. And that's what's nice about PBL is that it's often long-term project that they're doing. It's ongoing. So it's always something they're connected to, something that, relates to them, they care about. Other people are relying on them. Often sometimes there's collaborative nature involved. But I just think, it's not always just for the elementary, but it really needs to be an emphasis, I think, in middle and high school as well. For sure.
Yeah. Adam Fletcher, who's an educational blogger, said the biggest problem facing educators everywhere is the crisis of disconnection. And so when students feel disconnected between, the things they have to do in school and the things they want to do, when they reach the real world, they don't see the relevance or the importance. But project-based learning, when you can, and that's why I said teachers are the experts because they know their students. When you can tap into a passion that a student has or an interest and find a way, that's probably the hardest part is hooking them into, making a connection between the curriculum and something that they're interested in. Fortunately, I mentioned the summer experience that Zach and I were both a part of last year. And then I did a similar innovation camp this summer. And you're right. The students are showing up in the summer on their own time. They're not getting paid for it. They're there because they want to be there because they're learning about something in a way that's meaningful to them. And, the biggest comment that kind of has haunted me is why can't normal school be this way? And so you're absolutely right. When kids are able to learn in a way that excites them, gets them excited to go to school, we want school to be a place they want to be instead of have to be, right? So
yes,
this can definitely help.
Absolutely. When I think about step 2, when you talk about becoming an expert, I see Tony Wagner's, I hear his thought in my mind when he says, no one cares what you know. It's what you do with what you know. And that is so important. Kids are getting to do something that they want to do with what they've learned. And I think that that's what makes the difference there.
So what do you say when you work with teachers and they say, because I get this a lot, I don't have time for it. I don't have time. So how do you overcome that or help them overcome that?
I think what we try to do, and this is easier when talking to teachers in our own district because we know we're like teaching the same things as them, but it's like, we're not just doing this, we're not inventing this. We're taking the units that we already have in our curriculum that already reach the standards that we're required to teach. And we're just kind of like taking the content we're already teaching and just amping it up another way and another level. And I think PBL does take more time, but I think sometimes people overestimate how much more time it can take.
Yeah.
And they underestimate the growth that the students will have from PBL.
I was just going to say, not every project has to be, a semester long or a capstone, for you mentioned the IB. It doesn't have to be like that the final year and take up an entire year. They can be short as a day or a week. It just depends on the vision of your team, and like Zach said, what unit you're connecting it to.
Yeah. Has to be embedded. It has to make sense, right? It has to start with the standard, start with what you're doing. It's not something extra. And sometimes I tell them if it is something that is going to be long-term, just make sure you're touching on it like once a week or something like that, like on Fridays, that they're doing. They can do things during the week, but they kind of catch up together on it. In that way, you feel like you're still going along with other things that you wanted to do. But yeah, it just, and to your point, Jerri, too, it's the growth that ultimately teachers see students have that they'll get that bug, right? They'll catch this and get really into doing it because of that. I think it really is magical to see that happen in students.
Right. And you never know what kinds of careers you're really sparking for them. Another Tony Wagner quote I love, I think it's Tony Wagner, is don't ask kids what they want to be when they grow up. Ask them what kind of problems they want to solve. So, within one thing, if you take the Underground Railroad, you could talk about solving a lot of different kinds of problems, a lot of different kinds of interests in that, so I think that you really spark some creativity as far as maybe future careers, what kind of problems they want to solve. Well, that takes us to step 3. What is step 3 in this process?
Yeah. So step 3 is getting students to share their work. Once they've become the experts, they've created something, they've made something, we hope they're feeling really, really proud of it. And we want to give them the opportunity to share their learning with more of an audience than just inside of our classroom. So I think, many years ago when we started doing a lot of this and digging in, it was like we'd get to the end and then it's like, all right, well, this group will stand up and present. And by, April, May, March, the end of the school year, especially in elementary school, they've been with the same 25 kids the entire year. So we wanted to think of ways, how can we, level it up and get them to share their learning? So we've done this in many, many different ways. Some as simple as when Grayson taught 4th grade, his 4th graders would come over and listen to our class presentations. Not all of them, it would take a long time. And we'd go to his class and listen to a couple groups. So that's a simple way to start. We've done many other things. One huge project we did, we called it the Coding Academy, and students developed an app prototype using Keynote. So it kind of functioned like an app. But we set up in our cafeteria, all the students kind of had a little booth. They had their prototype. We invited all of the other grades to come in, walk around, play with their app, ask some questions. The kids kind of they kind of dressed up. Some kids wore a tie, some kids wore a suit jacket that day to kind of feel really proud. And that was just like a really big way to celebrate all that they have done. And part of it is just that it's a celebration. Like these kids have worked hard. They're proud of it. We want to show how proud we are, and we want to, showcase them. One other quick way before I pass it to Grayson, I love listening to podcasts. I've listened to podcasts for a long time. So about 4 years ago, I got the idea that I wanted my students to let's have a class podcast. So over the last 4 years, it's evolved in many ways, but it's called the 4th Grade Innovators Podcast. And started out when our morning meetings, we do a lot of discussion on positivity, growth mindset, goal setting. So it started out sharing those messages, and it's kind of evolved where sometimes it's an option when we do a project-based learning unit. Do you want to create a podcast episode to record and post as your final product? Yep, always an option. Some kids like it, some kids don't. And it's always, and when our class ones, we do a lot of whole class episodes. It's always optional if they want to be on it or not. But it's, in 4 years, it's gotten about 5,000 downloads in 50 different countries. So it's really reached way, way farther than I ever could have imagined. Grayson.
That's incredible. And then you think about the additional skills the kids are using with that. They have to plan and speak and articulate what they've done. It's just so wonderful that you're giving them those opportunities to do that, and to take the learning even further.
I record it on GarageBand, and then I let them listen to it back, and they're like, no, I want to redo it. I want to redo it. I want to redo it.
Oh, yeah, of course.
And
how many times do they ever want to redo something?
Yeah,
ever.
Right. Yeah. Right. That's right. We're always struggling to get them to proofread and read. Oh my gosh, you're right.
But the reason they want to redo it is because they have an audience, an authentic audience, right?
I had one student who I was on all year about his handwriting because I couldn't read what he was turning in. And then he got up to record one of his podcast episodes. And he gets up there and he goes to start, and he can't read the script that he wrote himself. And he looked at me. I'm like, well, what do you need to do? And he came back with a script that was beautiful handwriting. Like he had it in him. And then I remember Grayson had this student the next year when he was teaching 5th grade. And I walked down there one day. I'm like, let me see his notebook. And his notebook was in much clearer writing than it was the previous year, because he learned for once there was a purpose to it.
Jerri, I've forgotten. So we had a guest on. I'm going to give you guys some homework. We have a couple guests that I think you guys will love. One is award-winning culture, Hans Apple. Remember him? He has a podcast with his students, and we always said we wanted to do a podcast where having the kids come on who are doing podcasts. So Zach, we're going to have you back on again, and we'll have you and Hans on, and we'll get to hear the kids can collaborate through the podcast. I think that'd be great. Number 2, you always have Marvin here, our producer, as an expert too. And that would be kind of cool. This is what he does too.
Right.
And then the other one is for project-based learning. Because when we had these guys on, I kept thinking, oh my gosh, students are going to want to create this hidden in plain sight.
Oh, yes.
You guys have to go to our podcast called Hidden in Plain Sight and see what these guys did and are doing. And when your kids see it, this would be a medium that I think they would be very, very interested
Yes. And they want to work with schools to do this.
Yeah.
This project.
I'll just write those down. Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And, it's funny, when Zach first shared the idea of starting a podcast with me, he said, he listens to them all the time, but he had never made one. And so it was kind of like going through our own 3-part system. Like, he had to learn from an expert, and he had Kelly Croy was a guest, the host of The Wired Educator, right? He came and talked to students and got to tell them all about, what it takes to make a good hook, and what to do with negative feedback that you get, and all kinds of tips. And it kind of like shared the inside truth. And so teachers have to do that all the time. Zach mentioned the coding academy, and we had to learn how to do all this coding ourselves before we could teach our students about it. And so we were able to learn from experts and bring that back too. So yeah, it's a system that makes sense, and it's the natural way of learning things.
Full circle. Yeah.
Absolutely. So where can people find your books? Where can they buy them? Because I'm going to buy one for my daughter. That's in education.
Great. Yeah. So they're both available on Amazon and BarnesandNoble.com, or Walmart's website, all kinds of places that you can find it. The first is called The Expert Effect, and the second is called The Expert Expedition. Being teachers, we're all about alliteration and
love the alliteration. Got to have that. We organize our podcast in themes. And so we will have this in one of the themes, but we call them choice boards, so that teachers can come, or any educators can come and choose a theme, and then choose podcasts within that theme. And they actually can fill out a form for every 3 that they listen to for free CEU credit. But we also offer not only the podcast options, but also how do they want to listen to YouTube or Spotify or Apple, any platform, but also we give a link to the book. So we will have your link on there as well. I'll make sure that we have that there. We'll probably do the Amazon link. Yeah.
So our final question for you today, as you think about the work that you've done with PBL and students and this kind of thinking, what has become clear to you as an educator?
We have this philosophy. We want our students to be, earth shakers, move makers. We really want them to be future ready. And if we were to give our student, if we were to espouse that and then give our students worksheets and multiple choice quizzes, our actions wouldn't match our vision. And so we really realize that our actions need to match, the outcomes that we're looking for. And so, taking the risk and getting started is totally worth it. start small, start local. And then as you get more comfortable and you find those rabbit holes that you can go dive into, you can just grow from there and, add another project the next year. And so before too many years have gone by, you can live this work, breathe it in and breathe it out. So
you're modeling it for your students.
Right. Yeah. Our picture book was definitely a passion project that we did right alongside them during that innovation lab. Yeah.
Right. And then they can see that productive struggle that you go through and understand how important that is. I love that. That's fabulous. You're not just talking the talk, you're walking the walk. We love it. Yes. Zach, anything you want to add that's become clear to you?
Yeah, this will be like my mic drop moment at the end. But something that when I started PBL, that just like kind of hit me, and we wrote this in the book. But when you give kids the opportunity to amaze you, they usually do, is what we found.
Oh, I love that.
Those opportunities, they rise to the occasion. I've consistently seen students create things and do things that I wouldn't have thought possible at the beginning of it.
Yep, it is the truth. They put us in awe because, we hope that they do things and they go bigger and better almost every time. And it is just pure joy to watch that.
You know what? It's when you give teachers the opportunity to amaze you as well. They do, just like
Absolutely.
You two have.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
We've been very fortunate to have a supportive administration, and our central administration keeps asking us to present and share the message and share examples. And I would say my proudest moment as a teacher was in 2019. I was asked to share some of this message, and so I got the kids to do it. And at our welcome back breakfast, where the entire district of 1,200 teachers comes to one high school and they're in the auditorium, I had 4 of my students up on stage, and they were able to, giving them the most authentic audience imaginable, they were able to talk about the difference that it makes for them as learners. So
that's terrific. Yes. And again, think of the skills they gained just from doing that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, where can people find you online?
Yeah, so I'm most active on Twitter and Instagram. So on Twitter, it's at Mr. Rondot, and on Instagram, it's at Zach Rondot.
Yep, and I'm on Twitter and Instagram as well. We always like to share examples of what our kids are doing. On Twitter, I am G McKinney 2. And on Instagram, we set up an account for our book. And so it's at Expert Effect EDU.
Right there.
That's where you found
Yes.
Right there. All right. Yeah. And you're both linked there too. Your individual Instagrams are linked there too. So that's convenient. Very good.
And there's a link to your podcast, isn't there? On there? We can hear the kids' podcast?
Yes. Yes.
Oh,
if you look
yeah.
at mine, 4th grade Innovators podcast, and Grayson's class has one. It's a 5th grade Futurists podcast, and they should be.
Cool.
Oh,
right, good.
fabulous.
All
Very
right.
good. Well, we wish you a great rest of the week off before you
right.
start in next year, your new school year. And when do the kids come?
The kids come on Tuesday. We just finished our professional development week today. We've been in PD the last 3 days.
Well, you
All
look
right.
very relaxed now. When
You
this airs,
do.
when this airs, you might look a little different, and that's
Maybe.
okay.
Yep.
We'll be knee deep in the new projects and the new passions that the kids will bring. So we're excited.
All right.
Yes, and we'll follow and keep in touch with you and see what is happening. So thank you so much for joining us and sharing your message.
Thank you. It's great connecting with you.
Thank you both.
Yes.
Thank you for listening. And if you would like to stay linked up, be sure to follow us on Apple and Spotify and subscribe to us on YouTube.